It took me 10 years to understand that mornings are not simply the start of a new day. They're a reflection of who you've become. Every sunrise reveals something about your soul, what you've lost, what you've learned, and what still hurts quietly inside you. I used to wake up angry at life. Not in the loud way people imagine, but in the quiet frustration that hides behind every sigh. I hated mornings. The alarm would ring, the light would break through the curtains, and I'd already feel defeated. It was as if life demanded something from me I couldn't name. Oh. Back then, I thought peace was the place you arrive at. A job that fulfills you, a relationship that heals you, a version of yourself that never falters. But life kept breaking that illusion piece by piece until there was nothing left to hold on to except the silence I had been running from. I still remember one morning, gray light, cold air, a heavy kind of stillness that pressed against my chest. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't distract myself. I just sat there, listening. The silence felt unbearable at first. My thoughts screamed for noise, for something, anything to escape the stillness, but slowly the discomfort began to fade. There was something profound in that silence, something ancient. It wasn't emptiness. It was space, the kind of space where the mind starts to breathe again. It was there in that quiet that I realized how much of my life had been lived in reaction, reacting to messages, people, noise, expectations, always responding, never resting. And in that stillness, I discovered the truth. Silence isn't loneliness, it's clarity. See, it's the moment you finally meet yourself without disguise. The world teaches you to fear silence because it exposes what you truly think. But once you face it, you stop fearing your own mind. You stop needing the world to fill you. For years, I chased meaning outside myself. I thought it lived in success, love, approval. But meaning was always born in the quiet, in that slow moment when you simply observe life happening without trying to control it. I realized that silence was not the absence of something. It was the beginning of everything. There were days after that when I would sit alone for hours just watching the light change across the room. No music, no voice, no plan. And somehow, those moments healed me more than any conversation ever could. Because silence teaches you what no one else can. That peace was never lost. It was only drowned by noise. Years later, when I had learned to sit comfortably in silence, I encountered something even harder to accept. The things I could not fix. There's a quiet arrogance in trying to fix everything about yourself. I used to believe that every mistake was a sign of weakness, that every scar meant I hadn't healed properly. I kept treating life like a puzzle that could be completed with enough effort, enough books, enough reflection. But the truth is, life doesn't get solved, it gets lived. There were wounds I carried that refused to close no matter how much I tried. Memories that clung to me like shadows. Regrets that replayed in my mind like scenes from an old film. And every time I thought I was done with them, they'd return. Softer, but still there. It took me years to understand that not everything broken is meant to be repaired. Some things are meant to stay cracked, to remind you of where the light entered. Pain isn't a problem to be fixed. It's a teacher waiting to be heard. One night, sitting in a small apartment far from home, I stopped running. I stopped trying to turn my pain into poetry. I stopped pretending to be okay. I just sat there, letting it hurt. Letting it hurt. And in that pain, there was a strange relief, because finally I wasn't fighting it anymore. When you stop trying to fix everything, you give life permission to breathe again. You start realizing that the goal was never to become perfect. It was to become real. And being real means being cracked, uncertain, flawed. It means accepting that healing doesn't always mean closure. Sometimes it means learning how to live with the open parts. With time, I noticed something else, a pattern in my chaos. I thought I was free because I had no structure. I would wake up whenever I wanted, eat when I wanted, work only when inspiration struck. It felt like rebellion against the world's rhythm. But soon, my freedom became a prison. Days blurred into nights, energy drained, ideas scattered. I was alive, but not awake. That's when I began to realize that discipline isn't the enemy of freedom. It's the shape of it. Without structure, your mind roams without purpose. Without rhythm, even creativity begins to decay. At first, I resisted it. The idea of waking up early felt like surrendering to the world's control. But one morning, I tried it. I got up before dawn when everything was still. The air was cold, the streets silent. There was something holy about that hour, something untouched. In that stillness, I wrote, I breathed, I simply existed without distraction. For the first time, I felt in control not of the world, but of myself. Discipline, I realized, wasn't about restriction. It was about alignment. It was the quiet strength that keeps you steady when emotions try to pull you apart. Freedom is not doing what you want. It's wanting what is good for you. It's finding power in consistency, because every small act of discipline, waking up, breathing deeply, resisting chaos, becomes a declaration. I am not a slave to my impulses. Discipline is how you tell the universe you are ready to handle the peace you've been asking for. I carried that lesson with me into every part of my life, but life had more to teach. Lessons I didn't ask for, yet needed. People began to leave, some quietly, some violently. Friends faded, love turned distant, conversations ended mid-sentence. Every loss felt like a punishment. I kept asking myself what I did wrong, why everyone I cared for eventually drifted away. It took me years to realize that no one really leaves. They just stop being part of the version of you they once recognized. People don't always betray you. Sometimes they just stop fitting into your evolution. We grow, we shift, we unlearn, and the people who once walked beside us may not recognize the road anymore. There was someone I loved deeply, someone whose silence used to hurt more than words ever could. I tried everything to keep them close, but they were already gone long before they left. Wow. When they finally did, I broke apart. But with time, I understood. They weren't meant to stay. Their role in my story had ended. They were the mirror I needed at that time, the reflection of my own weaknesses, fears, and hopes. Once I saw what I needed to see, life took them away gently. Now, when people leave, I let them. I thank them quietly in my heart, because every departure is also a lesson in independence. It teaches you to build your peace on something no one can take. Yourself. The loneliness that once terrified me has become my sanctuary. It took me a decade to reach this kind of peace. A peace not made of comfort, but of understanding. I had learned to be silent, to accept, to discipline, to release. But the next lessons, the ones that shaped me completely, came after I had lost everything I thought defined me. When life strips you of everything you thought you needed, you learn who you are beneath all the noise. I lost many things along the way. Dreams, people, the sense of certainty that once held my world together. There was a time I would have called it failure. Now I see it differently. Loss is not the end of something. It's the space where transformation begins. When the structures of your life collapse, you finally see the foundation beneath them. I used to fear emptiness, but emptiness is only frightening until you learn to see it as possibility. In those years of starting over, I learned something that changed the way I live. It came quietly, like a whisper that wouldn't leave me alone. I realized that life doesn't reward the ones who complain about the weight they carry. It rewards those who learn to carry it with grace. There is a certain kind of strength that comes from doing what must be done, even when no one is watching. When your world falls apart, you can either wait for someone to rebuild it, or you can pick up one small piece and start arranging your own order again. The size of your step doesn't matter. The act of moving does. I remember mornings when I didn't want to rise. The air felt heavy, my chest even heavier. My thoughts would circle in quiet despair. What's the point? What's the purpose? But each time I forced myself to move, to stand, to breathe. And slowly that became a ritual. Over time, I began to understand that life doesn't wait for you to feel ready. The strength to live fully doesn't come before the act. It comes because of it. You don't wait for courage. You create it moment by moment through small actions. Pain will visit you many times. But if you face it with awareness, it eventually kneels before you. And then comes another kind of understanding that no one else can give you peace. People can walk beside you, love you, support you, but the responsibility of your inner world belongs only to you. I learned this when I kept depending on others for validation, for someone to remind me that I mattered, but peace borrowed from others will always expire. It's a quiet and painful realization. No one is coming to save you, but strangely, that's where freedom begins. When you stop expecting others to heal what only you can face, you begin to grow a kind of peace that no storm can touch. You stop measuring your worth by how people see you. You start living from within, not from reaction. And in that self-reliance, you find something unshakable: dignity. I used to think self-love was a feeling. Now I know it's a discipline. It's waking up each day and choosing not to abandon yourself. It's refusing to become your own enemy when life gets hard. And somewhere in the middle of that journey, I realized that my anger at the world had faded. I stopped blaming people, fate, time, or luck. I began to see that everything that ever happened, even the pain, had its purpose. It was all a quiet training for the soul. When I finally stopped asking a why me, I started understanding it for me. Everything that broke me was shaping something within. Every disappointment was an invitation to detach from what wasn't real. There's a story the Stoics told, that the obstacle is the way. I didn't fully understand it until I lived it. You can spend your life cursing your problems, or you can study them. Because hidden in every challenge is the blueprint of your evolution. I learned to thank my struggles, not in a romantic way, but in a grounded way, because they forced me to grow into someone I respected. Pain introduces you to yourself in ways comfort never will. That's when mornings began to feel different. I no longer woke up with anxiety or hurry. I began waking with a kind of calm gratitude, not for what I had, but for the chance to live with awareness. There's a secret I discovered about mornings. The world hasn't yet decided who you should be. In those early hours before you step into noise, you are still pure, untouched by expectations. That's the time to rewire your mind, to choose your thoughts before they choose you. Every morning, before words, before screens, I sit in silence. I breathe. I remember who I want to be today. Not for the world, but for myself. I remind myself, everything that happens is neutral. It's my perception that gives it power. If I guard my perception, I guard my peace. That understanding, that my thoughts shape my reality, became my quiet revolution. It's strange, but the more I practiced awareness, the simpler life became. Not easier, just simpler. I began to see that happiness was never about achievement. It was about alignment. When your actions, values, and thoughts move in the same direction, you no longer chase life. You walk beside it. And one day, I realized something I wish I had known 10 years earlier. Life isn't asking you to win. It's asking you to witness, to participate with awareness, to act but without clinging to outcomes. The Stoics called it amor fati, the love of fate. To not just accept what happens, but to embrace it as necessary. I began to practice this slowly. When things went wrong, I whispered to myself, this too is part of it. When people misunderstood me, I reminded myself, they see what they're ready to see. When life hurt, I said, let it teach me. In that acceptance, peace bloomed quietly, not loud, not triumphant, but steady. And the more I lived that way, the more I noticed something gentle about the universe. It never punishes, it only corrects. It removes what doesn't serve your growth, even when you fight to keep it. At first, that feels cruel, but later you see it as mercy. Every closed door protected me from something I wasn't ready for. Every delay was a form of preparation. Every ending was just space for something true. It took me 10 years to learn these things, not because they're complex, but because I was stubborn, because the mind resists simplicity. But once it surrenders, life becomes effortless. The morning has become my sanctuary. It's not about sunrise routines or success rituals anymore. It's about remembering that I don't need to fix everything, control everyone, or win every battle. All I need is presence. And that presence changes everything. It rewires the mind slowly, gently, until even chaos begins to sound like music. When I look back now, I don't see a perfect man. I see someone who fell, failed, learned, and kept walking. Someone who stopped asking for peace and started becoming it. I no longer chase lessons. I live them. I no longer chase people. I bless them. I no longer chase mornings. I wake to them. And if I could whisper one thing to the version of myself 10 years ago, I'd say this: stop running. Everything you were looking for is already within you, waiting in the quiet.